Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Gioacchino Rossini's Semiramide, live from the Washington Concert Opera with Anthony Walker on the podium, which I heard last night as a radio transmission on classical WETA 90.9 FM. My experience with this opera is mainly limited to Semiramide's very famous aria, Bel raggio lusinghier, which has become a very popular concert piece for many a soprano, next to Casta Diva from Norma and the Mad Scene from Lucia della Mermur, Arsaces a quel giorno ognoramento, which has also become a very popular concert piece for many a mezzo-soprano or contralto. The duet between Semiramide and Arsace, Giorno d'Orrore, which has also become a very popular opera duet composed for a soprano and mezzo-soprano. And even Assur, who is sung by a basso or a bass baritone, has his own mad scene. The original Semiramide was Isabella Colbran, who was very well known in collaborating in a lot of Rossini's other operas, including Elisabetta, La Regina d'Inghilterra, and Otello as Desdemona, and she was also very well known for her really wide range, from the low notes of a contralto to the piercing high notes of a dramatic coloratura soprano. While this opera didn't enjoy great amounts of fame compared to The Barber of Seville, Cenerentola, or William Tell, it still garnered a lot of great singers who were able to interpret this very iconic queen. From Giulia Grisi to Nellie Melba to Joan Sutherland to Montserrat Caballé to Katia Ricciarelli to Edita Gruberova to Mariella Devia and to many sopranos who were able to interpret this very iconic queen. And speaking of Semiramide, there have been a lot of legends told about this Babylonian queen. A lot of people say that Semiramide is a very powerful figure who is quite power hungry, very ambitious, almost Lady Macbeth-like, but at the same time has her own sense of feminine wiles and is very well known for being like a goddess in terms of her beauty and in terms of her overall power, and there have been a lot of legends told about this mythical queen. The story basically goes like this. Before the opera begins, Semiramide and Assur kill off Nino, and her son, Nina, has gone missing for quite some time after this horrifying event. Years have passed, and it has been prophesied that Semiramide will have an heir to the throne, and he will take over as king of Babylon. Enter Arsace, a young Assyrian commander who is betrothed to the princess Atsema. At the same time, he encounters the queen, and she is also in love with him, meaning that there are marriage arrangements between Semiramide and Arsace and the Indian prince Idreno and the princess Atsema. It's not until later in the opera that Arsace finds out through Oroe that he is the long-lost son of Semiramide, and the ghost of Nino, the dead husband of Semiramide, is basically ordering Arsace to ascend the throne, and Semiramide and Arsace therefore accept their fates. And once Arsace is about to kill Assur in the darkness, Semiramide is stabbed through Arsace's own sword, and Assur is led away in chains, claiming Arsace as the king of Babylon. So this story does have a lot of Shakespearean elements, mostly from Macbeth's ambition and want for power, and Hamlet's elements of revenge against someone who has poisoned the parent and therefore is up to the progeny to ascend the throne. You could definitely tell that there are a lot of really interesting Shakespearean elements not only found in the story, but also the characters as well. Semiramide may be the queen of Babylon, but she's also plagued by the many haunting guilt that affect her in terms of her position, and the fact that she also has a long-lost son in the mix makes her even more tragic of a character. Assur while he wants power, is also haunted by nightmares of his overall guilt. And when we have Arsace in the mix, in terms of the later parts of the opera, there's an element that Arsace will take over as king and avenge his father's death. So there are a lot of interesting elements found in this opera, which is no wonder why it enjoyed a lot of fame in terms of where it's performed, whether it be the Metropolitan Opera House or even a lot of the Italian opera houses or even a lot of the opera houses in Europe. The main reason why I wanted to listen to this particular transmission was because Jessica Pratt was our titular heroine. Before the likes of Norma, Violetta, Lucia, Amalia, Giovanna d'Arco, Lucrezia Contarini, Lucrezia Borgia, Anna Bolena, Maria Stuarda, and Elisabetta from Roberto Devereux stepped forth to challenge many a dramatic coloratura soprano in terms of their really difficult vocal lines and complex characterizations, there was Semiramide. And just like many of those roles, she herself also has a lot of challenging vocal lines and a lot of really great opportunities to show off a great acting skill in terms of the singers who have interpreted her. There is no shortage of sopranos who have embodied this queen, ranging from Joan Sutherland to what we have nowadays with Jessica Pratt and Albina Shagimuratova. And each of these sopranos have managed to find something very unique in terms of this queen, whether it be the vocal lines, handling all the coloratura, and even interpolating some high notes, to the complex characterization of this queen, from her guilt to her want for power, and even to her pure love for Arsace, and even to the guilt that she has with Asur. You could definitely tell that this role is quite a trip for many a dramatic coloratura soprano. And what more can I say about Jessica Pratt? She is the star of the show. She was able to really manipulate all her lines wonderfully. She is very skillful in handling a lot of the coloratura, which she has always been, and her rendition of Bel Raggio Lusinghier was just wonderful all throughout. She was able to handle all of her trills, all of her florid lines with such grace and agility, and she was able to really give off such a flawless performance of this Babylonian queen. Vivica Genot was a superb Arsace, and Arsace has been also very well known for attracting a lot of coloratura contraltos and coloratura mezzos to be able to sing a lot of his lines really well, whether it be all of the low notes or some of the high notes. And he really needs a very strong sounding coloratura contralto to be able to handle all of those florid lines, hit some high notes, and even handle the coloratura as masterfully as any contralto or mezzo can. And Vivica Genot has been a mezzo-soprano who I've been following for quite some time. She's been very well known in a lot of the Baroque operas and even some of the early bel canto operas, and she has shown that she is a very superb musician. She has a very pliable and agile sounding voice. She has a very strong vocal presence, and she just bursts with vivacity. And her duet with Jessica Pratt's Semiramide was also very well done, as their voices went hand in hand. Wayne Tigges was generally a good Asur, and Asur really needs a very strong sounding bass baritone or basso cantante, as he needs to hit some high notes but at the same time maintain that really deep, dark, rich basso color. And many of these Asurs have found themselves singing in a lot of the bass baritone roles, like Escamillo from Carmen, Wotan from The Ring, and to even some extent Klingzor from Parsifal and Pizarro from Fidelio. There has been no shortage of bass baritones who have interpreted the role of Asur, ranging from Vladimiro Ganzaroli to Samuel Raimi to Ildebrando D'Arcangelo. Each of these bass baritones and high bassos have found something very unique in terms of this king of a character. Wayne Tigas was a very fine musician all throughout, as he has a very fine bass baritone voice. However, in terms of some of the low notes, he does show signs of hollowness, and there are times that his low notes didn't sound that rich, and there are times that his intonation didn't really sound perfectly tuned, but I still have to give him loads of credit due to his vocal presence that he has to offer, and the fact that he was able to really sing this character with such abandon despite some of the vocal faults. But even with those said faults, he's still a very fine musician, and he still manages to use his bass baritone voice very well. It's just that there were moments where there was hollowness evident in some of the low notes. But I still have to give him a great amount of credit, as he was able to be a very fine vocal actor all throughout. Taylor Staton was an elegant idreno, and idreno really does need a fine lyric tenor who can be able to hit a lot of the high notes, and he has to bear a regal stage presence when interpreting this character. There's been no shortage of tenors who have interpreted idreno, from Frank Lopardo to Juan Diego Flores to Antonino Siragusa, and even to Gregory Kunda. They have been very well known in interpreting this tenor role, mostly because of the challenging vocal lines this character has to offer. And Taylor Staton really does a very fine job with idreno, as he has a very fine, light lyric tenor voice, which he uses to the best of his abilities, and he hits all the high notes with such precision and such accuracy that I was at the edge of my seat every time he sang those notes. And while he's still quite young, he nonetheless has a very bright future ahead of him in terms of all of the leading male bel canto roles, helped with a very sterling and silvery lyric tenor voice, which he used very well, making idreno come alive as a character. Evan Hughes was a sonorous oroe. Oroe needs a very fine basso cantante with strong low notes and a great amount of stage and vocal presence that he has to really hold up his own, even though this role is quite short. Many basso cantantes have found success and a lot of fame in this really fine character role, and a lot of them have went on to sing roles like Philip II, Fasold, Ramfis, the King, Massimiliano from Masnadieri, Silva from Hernani, and many of the great basso cantante roles. And Evan Hughes does a very fine job with embodying Oroe's priestly presence, helped with his very strong and penetrable basso cantante voice. And even though he's quite young as well, he nonetheless has a very great future ahead of him. He has a very fine technique, and his vocal presence was just so powerful in how he managed to make Oroe come alive. The Ghost of Nino was sung by Wei Wu, who was absolutely excellent. And The Ghost of Nino really does call for either a basso cantante or a basso profondo who can make this character quite haunting, but at the same time powerful and regal in his own special way. And many of these singers who have sung The Ghost of Nino have also went on to sing roles like the Grand Inquisitor, Sparafucile, the Commendatore, Osmin, and Sarastro. And Wei Wu has the voice of a true basso cantante slash basso profondo to make this character just come alive on stage, and he was able to really make this character quite terrifying, and he just managed to make his voice fill out the auditorium with power and strength that it was just one of the finest basso cantante instruments that I have ever heard on the radio. Patrick Cook was a fine lyric tenor in the role of Mitrane, and Natalie Conte as Atsema has a very gorgeous and silvery soprano instrument which she used very well. So the singing was absolutely wonderful all throughout. And special kudos has to go to Jessica Pratt and Vivico Janot, who were able to give such sterling vocal performances as Semiramide and Arsace respectively. And the conducting done by Anthony Walker was very wonderful. Yes, there were cuts from the libretto, as I also read the libretto online while listening to this opera. And while I didn't care too much about the cuts that occurred, I still had to say that he did a very fine job with leading the orchestra, and he knew how to really pay close attention to the text, and he was able to make the orchestra just bloom in their own special way. So the singing was very fine all throughout, helped with the very superb conducting done by Maestro Anthony Walker. And for those of you who have listened to this transmission, I would also love to know your opinions as well. Did you love all the singers? Was there a singer that stood out to you? Or did you feel like the singing was meh, best? Comment below and please let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in later for my review of Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, which is a review I've been pushing back for quite some time. Yeah, let's just say that real life has actually gotten the best of me in terms of my review schedule. But nonetheless, I'll still be able to make it. So until then, see you later, everybody.